The 2020 world events that are going on right now has really taught us that, let's be honest guys, $1,000 is not enough for an emergency fund. It's not going to cut it. In all honesty, $1,000 is not enough for an emergency fund. I really recommend having at least 3 to 6 months of expenses, bare minimum 1 month worth of expenses, but really moving into that 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. I'm going to share why you need a full emergency fund, what process you want to take to get into that full emergency fund, as well as what we're personally doing for ours. Stay tuned. Hey friends, welcome to Freedom in a Budget. I'm Kelly with freedominabudget.com. Go check out my site down below. But my channel is all about living life well on a budget. And budgets don't have to be constricting, let you not do anything. No, they give you freedom. And all about building your income, growing your wealth, investing, all of that fun stuff. So if that is something that interests you, I would love for you to subscribe, join the family. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you so much for coming back. So today, like I said, we're gonna talk about emergency funds. And emergency funds, they're critical. Like, this is what we're going on in the world right now has really taught us that we need an emergency fund. And honestly guys, the $1,000, it's not enough. And us personal people have learned that, as well as big corporations. There's so many corporations that have learned this now, that they don't have enough cash reserve. They don't have enough money in the bank when, you know, they're out of business or revenue is going down for a couple weeks. They're scrambling. My job was very secure. We're in the healthcare industry. Healthcare is needed right now. Even with everything that's going on, we're struggling, and they've had to make huge pay cuts, cut 401k matches, and they're going to be starting layoffs soon as well. So it's scary, and that means that we as people need emergency funds. We need full emergency funds. So we're going to talk about that, what that means, why $1,000 is enough. So let's get into it. So first, let's talk about $1,000 expense. So say something happens that's $1,000. That honestly is typically gonna be general wear and tear on your car, general wear and tear on your house, or your AC, or your roof has a leak, something like that. That's all to be expected. That's not an emergency fund. That's all something that we know is gonna happen. And for those, I would recommend having a sinking fund for it. We have a car repair sinking fund, a house sinking fund, a medical sinking fund, anything like that. We know stuff is gonna come up. We know that things are going to be thrown at us. That's just life. So what we do for those is we have a sinking fund for it in a high yield savings account that's there, and that is on top of our emergency fund. So that is on top of anything. We want, you know, something like a job loss, something like a sickness, something like major. That's what we'll categorize as needing the emergency fund. But anything of those smaller amounts, that's going to be just from a sinking fund. That's just going to be from general savings that we can just pull from. Now, $1,000 emergency fund. A lot of people have said, Kelly, I can barely come up with $1,000. How am I supposed to come up with a month's worth of expenses or 6 months? How am I going to do this? Okay, but keep in mind, guys, that if you are at that lower income level, and trust me, I've been there. When I started this channel, I was making $35,000 a year. I was living paycheck to paycheck. I was behind on my bills, all of that. I've been there. So I'm not saying this from a high horse of looking down on you guys. Trust me, 4 years ago, I was there as well. I've been in the trenches with you. I know what it's like. I know how scary it is to have your power shut off. I know how scary it is to have your card declined. I know how scary it is to be going through that and overdrafting on your account over and over again. I've been there, trust me. So with that being said, of the people that are making lower incomes, that $1,000 just seems like such a stretch. Your 1 month's worth of expenses is going to be a lot different and a lot lower than people that have higher cost of living, higher bills, higher incomes as well. So your 1 month's worth of expenses may be $2,000, whereas someone else could be $6,000 or $7,000. So just keep in mind that that is part of it as well. I do have a full series on YouTube as well, and a playlist of different budgetings for different income levels. So I have one for $1,500 monthly income level, $2,000, $4,000, $6,000. I have a whole bunch of different ones at different income levels. So go check that out as well. And that's going to kind of break it down. And I'm also working on a video for you right now on how to do a bare bones budget, how to do that. So that's going to be coming out in the next week. I think it's set for next week. So check that out. But those income levels, they are going to change. So we want to eventually move into 3 to 6 to eventually down the road, a full year's worth of expenses. And that brings me to my next point of, I'm talking really fast, but I am like, this is passionate to me. And so a full year's worth of expenses, and to build that up over time. Now, financial security. To me, yes, I want you guys debt free. Yes, we don't have debt outside our mortgage. We're paying off our mortgage. But at the same time, I want cash reserve. Cash reserve to me is more financial security than not having that debt. So as much as debt payoff is important, right now, I think that you should be pausing your debt snowball, pausing your debt avalanche, whatever it may be in this time of crisis that this world is in. And then once we get past this crisis world event that we're going through, then you can start paying down that debt a little bit more. So when that time comes, maybe do half and half. Maybe do 50% to it. So you have $500 extra in the month, put half of that $250 towards your debt and $250 towards your emergency fund. Have a goal that at the end of a year, you build up 1 to 2 months more of expenses in your emergency fund. So maybe at the end of this year, your goal is to have 1 month's worth of expenses, 2 months worth of expenses. And then next year, your goal is to get up to 4 months worth of expenses. And then the next year, 6 months. And then over time, you can build that up to have a full year. I'm not saying have a full year's worth of expenses this year. Like that's not gonna happen, but building that up. And also months of expenses. That does not necessarily mean total income. A lot of times that's misunderstood. You may have $5,000 that you bring in from your day jobs, from your side hustle, all of that, but your expenses may only be $4,500. So that doesn't mean your emergency fund for that month isn't $5,000. No, it's $4,500 because we're just looking at expenses. We're not talking about total income. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, next we're gonna talk about credit cards. Now, I'm gonna go on a rant. It may be entertaining. It may, you've heard it before, but I'm gonna do it again. So credit cards, I never used credit cards before. Then I started, my max went out and then I stopped. Now we are back on credit cards. But credit cards should not be an emergency fund. Credit card, that is my biggest pet peeve. If you're in like an icebreaker at work and they say, what's your biggest pet peeve? That's my biggest pet peeve, is when these credit card companies and people say, this credit card is in case of an emergency. Guys, a credit card should never be used in case of an emergency. An emergency is already bad. Emergency is already, you are struggling, you are in the trenches, something went down, you can't pay. You shouldn't have to pay 24% of interest on top of that. That 24% interest, or 20% interest, whatever it may be, you're paying an extra $240 for every $1,000. No. Guys, no, that is why you need an emergency fund, so you're not paying that extra 20-something% interest on top of the emergency. Guys, that's crazy talk. That is the marketing that these credit card companies have put into it, and y'all, it works. No, 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 no. Have an emergency fund. Use that in case of an emergency. Don't be relying on your credit cards. Now, don't get me wrong. We use our credit cards. We pay them off every month. We treat them like a debit card. We honestly do, is we swipe them and we just pay them off every month. And we don't hold a balance on them. We don't pay interest at all on them. We just get the perks of the credit cards. So please, 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 if you're going to use credit cards, that's fine, but do not carry a balance on them. Do not rely on a credit card in case of an emergency. If you had that mindset of I'm going to use this in case of emergency, that's when you need to cut it up. If you're overspending on your credit cards and you're unable to pay the minimums, that's when you need to cut it up. It's not an emergency fund. Okay, and rants with that. We're done with that. Next, paycheck to paycheck. Guys, we want to get to at least 1 month's worth of expenses so that we can get ahead on our bills, so that we can stop living paycheck to paycheck. I really want you to break that cycle of living paycheck to paycheck. That is a scary place to be. When you get 1 month's worth of expenses ahead, then you're able to really breathe. Then you're able to relax a little bit. I have a full video that I'll link down below for you guys on how to stop living paycheck to paycheck, what you need to do, what steps you need to take, tips to do it. It's going to be a great actionable plan for you. It's a little tough. It's not easy. I'm going to be honest with you guys. It takes work, but it's really going to help you put that plan in place to stop living paycheck to paycheck, break that cycle, and breathe. Okay, now we're going to talk about why $1,000 is not enough for an emergency fund. We're going to break it down for you guys. First, let's talk about the elephant in the room. We all know who said that you need a $1,000 emergency fund. Now, think about when Financial Peace University was created. It was created back in the 80s. $1,000 in the 80s is not the same as $1,000 today in 2020. It's not. It would be, I think I've done the calculation, I think it's about $1,900. So it's almost doubled in that time frame. So that is another reason why I want you to have a full month's worth of expenses, because a full month's worth of expenses goes with you with inflation, because as your expenses increase, then your emergency fund is going to increase as well. Take into consideration inflation and what has happened in those years since that program was created. And I'm not throwing any shade. I love Dave Ramsey to death. I am a huge supporter of him. He is the one that helped me get my finances in order. But please take into consideration inflation in that time frame. And also take into consideration your mortgage. Is your mortgage or your rent over $1,000? A lot of places in the country it is. Now there's some places in like rural Alabama that rent is a lot cheaper, mortgage is a lot cheaper, but I know for us, our mortgage is $1,600 a month. $1,000 wouldn't even cover our mortgage, wouldn't even cover barely half the month for us if something happened. So having that full month, that's really gonna help protect you in case you don't wanna get evicted, you don't wanna get kicked out or anything like that. So having that at least so you can go and get another job, do your side hustle, do what you need to do, talk with your people to get that money in order. Next is taking into consideration the size of your family. Is your family just you, or is it your spouse, or do you have a family of 4, a family of 6? How big is your family? That's also going to determine how much of an emergency fund you need. If you have a family of 6, and you only have $1,000, that's barely gonna cover groceries. That's really gonna be cutting it very, very close in an emergency. So please take into consideration the size of your family. Like I said, your housing costs, all of that needs to go into it. And that's why I think that the 1 month is such a great way, because it depends, it moves with you. If you have a small family, it's smaller. If you have a big family, it's bigger. And it really is going to help gauge, because everyone is different. Guys, personal finance is personal. What works for you is not going to work for me. What works for me is not going to work for Joe over here. It's all going to be different. It's all personal. Next is, how much debt do you have? Do you have debt that is over $1,000 for your minimum payments? That's also going to be huge. You want to make sure that if something happens, that you're still able to make those minimum payments, so you don't have your car repossessed like I've had. You guys have seen my car repossessed video. It was a doozy, but you don't want your car to get repossessed. You don't want to go into default on your loans. You don't want to have the IRS after you. Those are huge, and really take into consideration of how much debt you have is really going to help determine how much you need for an emergency fund. If you want to get 1 month ahead on your bills, break that paycheck to paycheck cycle, watch this video here. And if you want to know how we're able to build up 7 streams of income, watch this video here. No.